Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and this is most likely the last Conquering Finale video that I will make. As I'm sure you're all aware, Make Music has decided to stop developing Finale. This is just about 2 weeks ago, and so here we are. I have a lot to say. I apologize in advance. This is going to be probably a very long video. Towards the middle, I'm going to talk a lot about XML and exporting out of Finale and importing into Sibelius and Dorico, but there's a bunch of stuff I want to say before we get to that point, so just bear with me. Hopefully this will also be useful information. First of all, I just want to point out that today, the day that I'm recording this, is Saturday, September 7th, which is almost 2 weeks after the initial announcement that Make Music made that they're not developing Finale any further. This is important because even within those last 2 weeks, there have been a lot of fast-moving developments. Who knows, in the next week or two or month or so, there may be more developments. If there are updates to any of this information, I will, post it on the website, on the comments of the YouTube video, etc. But the information that you're getting from me right now is current as of September 7th, 2024. Again, the big news, Make Music announced on August 26, 2024 that they are ceasing development of Finale after 36 years, which is an incredible run for any software program. Now, why they've decided to do this, who knows? It's most likely just business reasons. They weren't making enough money, didn't want to, invest in it anymore, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But if you want, about a week ago, I did a podcast on scoring notes with Philip Rothman, and the first half of that podcast really went into depth about possible business reasons for this decision, etc. So you can definitely check that out. It's worth listening to. But for now, I just kind of want to lay out the facts as they are, again, as of September 7th, about the licenses and certain transitions and stuff like that. So first of all, if you own any version of Finale, that version can be authorized or reinstalled on a computer or a new computer basically indefinitely. Now, presumably indefinitely is longer than a year because the initial announcement on August 26th was that it was only going to be for a year, and then there was some blowback in the Finale community, and Make Music sort of said, okay, we'll make it indefinitely. So presumably indefinitely is actually longer than a year, but how much longer than a year is hard to say. I mean, who knows if Make Music is going to be around 2 or 5 or 10 years from now. So it's really hard to say how much longer, we'll be able to authorize and reinstall Finale on our computers. But hopefully it's longer than a year. Make Music has stopped selling any brand new licenses or stopped selling upgrades as of 8/26/24. So if you're on an old version of Finale, unfortunately, you can't buy an upgrade to the latest version, with one caveat, which I'll get to in a second. Make Music will also stop all technical support of Finale on August 26, 2025, 1 year after the announcement. So beyond that date, if you have an issue with Finale, you're basically on your own. In addition to this, Steinberg, the maker of Dorico, made a deal with Make Music to offer a $149 cross-grade to Dorico Pro for a limited time. Now, of course, limited as of yet is unspecified. I would hope that would be a month or 2 or 3 or 4. It's hard to say. I would hope that it would at least be longer than the trial version of Dorico, which is 30, 60 days. I forget what it is exactly, but hopefully it will be longer than that. And a new development, all of this is developing fast. With that cross-grade to Dorico, Make Music is now giving you a download license to the last version, or the latest version, which is now the last version of Finale 27.4.1. There's a specific reason for that. The latest version has the most recent version of MusicXML, the file format that transitions from one notation software to another. The earlier versions didn't have 4.0, so in an effort to ease the transition from Finale to the other software program, they wanted to offer 27 just so you could use that XML 4.0 feature to export your files and ultimately import it into Dorico. So with that $149 cross-grade to Dorico, you're not only getting the latest version of Dorico, you're also getting the latest version of Finale, which, in normal circumstances would be an incredible deal to get 2 professional software programs for $149. But now, about a week after that initial announcement, Sibelius finally caught up and followed suit, and they're offering a cross-grade offer of their own. The Sibelius cross-grade version is confusing because the Sibelius licensing system is confusing, and you can learn more about this, but they basically have a subscription plan and a perpetual license. The Crossgrade offer for the subscription plan is $99 for 2 full years of subscription, and then after that 2 years, you just pay the normal subscription fee, which I forget what it is, but you'll just pay that every year. For the perpetual license, it's $149 for the Crossgrade. Again, you'll have to read more about what the difference between the subscription and the perpetual, but generally the subscription gives you updates to Sibelius, constantly for as long as you are a subscriber to the program. So whatever, you'll always have the latest version of Sibelius with that subscription. The perpetual license is a one-time fee. You pay it once, you get Sibelius. You also get upgrades for a year. So you can keep upgrading Sibelius for a year. At the end of that year, you're basically stuck on that last upgrade. So the next upgrade that happens you don't get unless you add another perpetual license, or you change to a subscription, etc. It's a little bit confusing, but you can learn more about this. But that's basically the offer: $99 for 2 years of subscription, and then the regular subscription price after that, or $149 for the perpetual license. So I've been asked a lot in the last couple of weeks, which one should I choose, Sibelius or Dorico? I have opinions about this that could probably take hours to explain, but it all boils down to either or both. That's my advice. Get one or the other, or both of them, honestly. They both have their pros, they both have their cons. I mean, again, I could speak about this for hours, but I'll just give you sort of the real quick and dirty version of this. The main thing that Sibelius has over Dorico is that it has way more users. So if collaboration is your main concern, you're definitely going to find more Sibelius users right now than there are Dorico users. So that may be reason enough alone just to go to Sibelius instead of Dorico. In my humble opinion, I think Sibelius is slightly quicker to learn than Dorico. So if you're really concerned about a learning curve, maybe Sibelius is worth a try. Some of the cons to Sibelius is that, Sibelius is almost just as old as Finale. It has a lot of bugs, just like Finale has. So, who knows? I don't think Sibelius is going away anytime soon. Their development team still seems to be pretty active. So I don't think that's quite at risk yet. But again, you're just dealing with an old program. So, it is what it is. And the other major con for me, specifically about Sibelius, is that I don't think it looks as good out of the box. Like, you open a default document in Sibelius, I don't think it looks nearly as good as Dorico or Finale for that matter. I mean, yeah, you can always change things in all of these programs to make things better, but just right out of the box, Sibelius doesn't look that great in my opinion compared to the other two. Dorico, on the other hand, out of the box, you open a default document and put notes on the page, it absolutely looks gorgeous. I think better than Finale in a lot of ways. So Dorico definitely has that going for it. It's also a newer software. It's been around for 8 years, and they're already on version 5.1. They develop very fast. They're constantly adding new features, which is great. It's sort of a cutting-edge software. They have a play mode, which is almost like a DAW. It's really kind of cool. There's a lot of great features in it. But some of the cons for Dorico, it does have a very steep learning curve, in my opinion, especially coming from Finale. Conceptually, Finale and Dorico is like oil and water. I mean, you almost have to jettison your thinking about a notation software coming from Finale to Dorico and just learn from scratch. So that is a major hurdle, in my opinion. And the other con, which is not trivial, is that there's just not as many users of Dorico yet. Again, if collaboration is your concern, you're not going to find as many Dorico users. I mean, Sibelius had the lion's share of the market for years. Even if all of the Finale users went over to Dorico, Sibelius is still going to have more users than Dorico. So, if that's a concern, definitely take that into account. The other dark horse here is MuseScore. They have a program, MuseScore Studio. The big bonus of this is that it's free. It is a free program. And I don't use MuseScore. I don't have MuseScore. I don't use it. But what I understand is that it does have amazing playback. So if that's a concern of yours, then that might be an option as well. It really does have a huge user base. I mean, that's partially because it's free, I think. But it's a question of what actually is that user base. I'm sure it's a lot of weekend warriors, people that are not, professional musicians that just want to do this. It's a free app, so why not try it? And as far as I understand it, the program as of now, I think it's version 4.4. Again, another fast developing program, so their features are added constantly all the time. But as of now, it's still sort of lacking a lot of the professional options that professional copyists require, in regards to layout and stuff like that. So my understanding is that it's not quite up to speed with Sibelius or Dorico yet, but depending on what you need to do with it, MuseScore might be perfectly acceptable, and it's free. So, that's also an option. So let's talk about transitioning from Finale to Sibelius or Dorico, and what do you do now? What's my advice? So here's the thing. Finale is still usable. It will be usable sort of for the foreseeable future, with a huge caveat, being the operating system, especially on the Mac side. Finale users are used to this. Whenever Apple introduces a new operating system, it always causes some sort of bug with Finale. Sometimes those bugs are really minor. Sometimes those bugs are completely fatal. So it's hard to say. Sequoia's on the horizon. I mean, it's early September. Sequoia's should be arriving in late September, early October. I mean, for me personally, I never upgrade my Apple software until way later. So I probably won't be getting into Sequoia until December, January, February even. So that's a major concern. If Sequoia bricks Finale, I mean, that's going to be a problem. So the thing is, if you're going to keep using Finale, you probably have to keep using it on Sonoma. Windows is not quite as bad, but there might be some updates that might destroy Finale. So you just have to be careful on the Windows side as well. But anyway, I mean, Finale is still usable. It's not like August 26th came and the program just evaporated from our computers. It's still there. We can still use it. My advice is you should just keep using it on old projects as much as you can until you start learning whatever new software you're going to get into, And for some of us, if you can do this is also a good idea. You can either get like some sort of virtual machine on your computer, you can sort of parse your hard drive out to just run Sonoma or something like that, or just put Finale on an old computer that you're not going to update. I actually went out and bought the cheapest Mac Mini that exists and put Finale on it. It's got Sonoma on it. I'm never going to upgrade it. That computer should be good for 10 or 12 years, I would think. So I'll be able to use Finale for as long as I need to, probably. So again, Finale is not completely dead. It's still usable. But beyond that, we have to start talking about MusicXML conversion. And like I said, I'm going to really dive into this in a few minutes. So that's the main way you're going to convert your files that exist from Finale to Dorico or Sibelius. MusicXML is sort of like a universal language. But aside from MusicXML, I cannot emphasize this enough. PDFs. Just make sure that you have PDFs of everything. Your Finale files, Finale renders the music in a certain way. Dorico Sibelius cannot represent on the page exactly the same thing that Finale represents. So if you have it on PDF, that is exact representation, graphically speaking, right? So as long as you have that PDF, you have that music forever, ostensibly. I mean, I don't think PDF is going to go away. If you really want to get crazy, you can print everything too. But PDFs, that will be your sort of, firewall, as it were. Worst case scenario, you have the PDF, you can open it, you can re-enter it in Dorico or Sibelius. Worst case scenario, right? So just make sure that you have PDFs of everything. And then here's a piece of advice about MusicXML conversion. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, like I said, but don't let MusicXML conversion be your first experience in the new software. Learn the program first, all right? I can't stress that enough. So XML conversion is not perfect, and you'll understand this as I get into this in a little bit. But the better you know the software, the less painful it will be importing those files and making the adjustments that you need to make. Like, if you don't know the software, you don't know how to fix the weird things that XML does, right? So I just don't make XML conversion your first experience, because it's going to give you a bad taste in your mouth. You're going to think, oh, Dorico is horrible because my Finale file looks horrible in it. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that simple, right? Learn the program. I can't stress that enough. So my advice is, convert everything to XML whenever you can, as soon as you can, whatever you want. But just leave those files in place on your computer, right? They'll be there. XML is not going to change very much in the next several years. You can always open those XML files in Sibelius or Dorico. Just have them on your computer. Back them up, of course, but just sit tight until you need those files. If you need those files 2 months, 5 months, a year down the road, by then you're going to know those programs so much better, and importing those XML files is just going to be so much better. So yeah, just don't rush to convert everything all at once. The other thing I will say is that in the last couple of weeks, there have already been a bunch of YouTube videos that have sprouted up about making this XML conversion from Finale to Dorico or Sibelius. If I can, I'll try to link some of my favorites on the video description and on the website, so you can check those out as well. And just generally, there are a ton of tutorial videos for both Sibelius and Dorico. Again, hopefully I'll be able to link some of the good ones for you. But aside from that, last week there was an ASMAC presentation about the Finale's finale, I think they called it, and John Hinchy had created a great video that I'm gonna again put a link to. I might actually just embed that video on the webpage. About the parallel concepts between Finale and Dorico. So he opens Finale and he says, in Finale you do this, but in Dorico it would be this. In Finale it's called this, in Dorico it's called this. It's a great primer for making that transition from Finale to Dorico. So yeah, I can't recommend that enough. Just watch that. It's 10 or 12 or something minutes long. It's definitely worth it. Again, I'll put a link up on the website. And then one final thing, just to sort of squash this rumor / misinformation or whatever, Dorico, or Sibelius for that matter, will not open Finale files. They will not open .mus or .musx files directly. It doesn't happen. It probably never will. Daniel Spreadberry at one point was talking about this, and he said, in order to make Dorico open a Finale file, they would almost have to, sort of reverse engineer Finale in a way. It's like, why would you do that? Especially when MusicXML is designed specifically for this purpose of transitioning from one notation software to another. It's a universal language built specifically for that. There is no value, there's no world in which Dorico would ever add the capabilities of opening a Finale file. It's just technically infeasible, and practically it's just impractical. So just make sure that you understand that, and know that if you do need to get that data from Finale to Dorico, you have to export an XML file out of Finale first and then import it into Dorico or Sibelius. And speaking of that, that's where I want to move to next. I'm going to flip things around. I'm going to start showing you my screen, and we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds about exporting XML out of Finale and into Sibelius and Dorico. So hang tight. I'll be with you in 1 second. All right, so here we are in perhaps a more familiar landscape for the Conquering Finale viewers, my computer screen. We're going to dive a little bit into MusicXML. I've got this file pulled up. This is from an old category, the missing linked parts. I'm just going to use this as a demonstration file for MusicXML. Now, in Finale, all the MusicXML options can be found in the File menu. There are some options in the Import and the Export submenu here. Obviously, for now, we're going to ignore everything in the import side because I don't think many people are going to be importing XML into Finale, but a lot of people are going to be exporting XML out of Finale these days. So that's where we're going to focus our attention. There are 4 options here that I'm going to dive into, but I do want to give you some general information about MusicXML before we do that, because I feel like when you understand what MusicXML is and what it isn't, you'll have a better appreciation for how it transfers from one format to another and why there are certain challenges with that. So let's just talk about MusicXML. So XML, or Extensible Markup Language, itself is a generic format that converts any type of file data into some form of text data that could be read by computers or theoretically by humans as well, right? MusicXML is a specific type of XML language, right? Now, this MusicXML language was invented by Michael Good. It was first released in 2004 by his company called Recordare. In 2011, Make Music, the makers of Finale, actually acquired Recordare and the MusicXML format and took over development of that, and they brought Michael Good along for the ride. It was at Make Music for several years, and then in 2015, the MusicXML format was transferred to the W3C Music Notation Community Group, which has been developing MusicXML ever since then. Michael Good also went to that group to help with MusicXML, but recently, either last year or maybe the year before, Michael Good actually retired. So MusicXML is now in the hands of other people at the W3C. Currently, MusicXML is in version 4.0, but my understanding is that 4.1 actually might be on the horizon, either soon or maybe not so soon, or at some point down the road. I believe 4.1 will be released. So what does MusicXML do? Like, how does this work, right? So basically a notation app like Finale, right? It has a lot of different elements. It has notes, it has rest, it has articulations and slurs and dynamics and staff labels and titles and all kinds of formatting data, measure numbers, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of different types of data. And that data is represented in a very specific way in the Finale files themselves as ones and zeros probably, or something like that. And Finale is really the only program that can understand those Finale files. The MusicXML language is intended to be a go-between between different programs, because the ones and zeros in a Dorico file are completely different than the ones and zeros in a Finale file, right? So basically, MusicXML is a translation. Finale has to export all of this data that it's being represented in ones and zeros in its own file format into this text data, and then that text data gets read by a different program and then converted by that program into the proprietary data for that program. Does that make sense? And just as a fun little thing, here is what the MusicXML text data actually looks like. It is real text. Like, you can read all of this stuff. I mean, it would take a while to understand this, and this file is enormous. It's a lot of text. This happens to be the uncompressed version. There's also a compressed version of XML now, which just turns a lot of those words into Unicode characters. This has the effect of really shortening this file by 95% or something. So, you know, this looks like gibberish, but the music notation software knows how to read this gibberish as plain text, essentially. And then it converts all of these text items, basically, into the data for that particular program. Right? So all well and good. So you may start to understand that the problem here, transferring one file to another via XML, is that the notation software themselves represents these notation elements in very, very different ways, right? Now, there's sort of three categories of information. I think there might be more. I mean, at least I'm categorizing this way. There's sort of the core musical data, right? So if you look at this file, you know, I can zoom in and I can tell you that there is an E in the violin 1 part on beat 1 that lasts for a half note, and then a C sharp that's a beat and a half. And then we have an F sharp with a slur on it, then an E, and then a D with a staccato note, right? On that first note E, there's a piano marking. You know, the whole thing is in 2/2. It's in the key of A. This is the violin 1. It's et cetera, et cetera. This is like basic musical data that exists. That type of information is very easy to represent in a text file like MusicXML. You just, I mean, in whatever coding way they have it, it's just saying there's an E on beat 1 for a half note in violin 1, right? The program that opens that XML file, that's very easy to interpret and say, okay, I'll put an E on beat 1 of the violin 1 part, right? Easy enough, right? So a lot of that core musical data is very simple for each program to both export as MusicXML and then import as MusicXML. So when you do this conversion, that's really the important thing. That musical data will be very, very accurate going across from one program to the other. But there is other things in this file that exist, other data that exists that also does get exported to the MusicXML format. Certain things like formatting, right? So things like page size, staff size, right? That stuff is relatively easy. You know, Finale can say, hey, the score is formatted on letter paper, and Dorico can look at that text information and say, oh, well, that's easy. I know how to make the score on letter information. Done. You know what I mean? Certain things like staff size, that's all relatively easy. But there are other things like, you know, casting off, right? That's where it gets a little bit complex, because the casting off involves use of the spacing algorithms, which are very different between programs. So in Finale, I don't have any system locks right now, and Finale's decided that, you know, these 5 measures are going to fit on the first system based on the, you know, spacing algorithms, where the margins are, the size of the staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the following staff, it's another 5 measures, et cetera, right? That information, that casting off, is calculated differently in all 3 programs. There's completely different algorithms for that. So you can't just say, use this spacing algorithm because that spacing algorithm doesn't exist in the other programs, right? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So things like casting off sometimes doesn't transfer over. Now you can lock a system in Finale, as you know. You press the L key and you get this little lock icon. There are similar things that you can do in both Sibelius and Dorico to do the same thing. They both call them system breaks instead of system locks. It's sort of the same idea. But again, that information is passed along through the MusicXML. It's sometimes a question of whether or not the new program can actually import that information and know what to do with it necessarily, right? So in some cases, these system locks may not transfer from one program to another. Measure number regions is another great example. Like Finale has this measure number regions system for when you need to do A and B bars or skip measure numbers. Sibelius and Dorico has nothing similar to this whatsoever. You handle those things completely differently. There's no such thing as measure regions in those other two programs. So there's no way to encode this in any way that makes sense to the MusicXML language and then decode it on the other side. It doesn't work. So any information in the measure number region situation here will not get transferred in MusicXML. It just won't. That's just the sort of reality of it. The other sort of category of information, I think, is really positional data, right? So every item that gets added to a page gets a certain position, right? So here's this piano mark. It's exactly this many whatevers from the bottom of the staff or from whatever. Again, the problem is that each of the programs does something differently with positions. For Finale, maybe there's a specific point at which the position is referenced from. In Sibelius, that might be different. In Dorico, it might be different. And then when you move an item, right, that data, that information about how far that's been moved, yes, that does come through in the XML, but the way that the programs render that information is so completely different. The reference points are so completely different that a lot of times you may get that data transferred, but it produces something different. I might have done that in Finale, and it might look like that in Sibelius or something. You know what I mean? So it's really hard to get some of that type of information across platforms like that. The second challenge to MusicXML transfer is that in both Sibelius and Dorico, they don't even encode or decode all of the potential data that exists in the MusicXML language, right? Think about that for a second. So we're on MusicXML 4.0. Sibelius is actually still using MusicXML 3.1. Now, I would have to assume that since the news of Finale being discontinued has been released, I have a feeling that MusicXML is Sibelius's #1 priority right now. I feel like everybody dropped everything they're doing to get Sibelius up to MusicXML 4.0, and I'm sure that the next update of Sibelius is probably going to have that. So, this is the situation right now, but probably not for long. But again, Sibelius is only at 3.1, so there's extra data available in 4.0 that Sibelius just can't even look at. Dorico is up to MusicXML 4.0, but believe it or not, the decoding options in Dorico to get from the MusicXML to the Dorico data, it doesn't even import all of the data in MusicXML. There's a lot of things that Dorico just ignores in the XML data simply because they haven't programmed that data to do something specific in the program. Daniel Spreadberry was mentioning this in the seminar, the ASMAC seminar a few days ago, specifically those system locks that I showed you, right? You can lock the systems, and this data will come across in the XML file, but Dorico just hasn't built out the capability to interpret that and convert it to a system lock. So unfortunately, as of today, again, September 7th, Dorico can't deal with these systems lock. Now, Daniel also mentioned that they're also planning to revisit XML in Dorico because of this news of Finale, and I believe that in a future update of Dorico, they're going to really beef up what exactly Dorico can interpret in these XML files. So it's just interesting to know because XML has the potential to carry a lot of data, but even in Sibelius and Dorico, it just doesn't necessarily handle all of that data. Interestingly, because Make Music has been developing Finale and MusicXML for a long time, the MusicXML features in Finale are actually the most robust XML features of any of the notation software out there. Finale exports more XML data than any other program, and it imports more XML data than any other program. So that's sort of good news in a specific way, because as of now, we export all of this data out of Finale. We have the most possible data available to us, right? Again, Sibelius and Dorico are going to do some catching up in terms of what they can import. So this is another reason why I just suggest wait a little bit before you import your files into Dorico and Sibelius. Eventually, these updates to those programs are going to be able to make the import better, because it's going to be able to read more of the data from the XML file. That's where we are with MusicXML. Hopefully, this sort of sets the tone for understanding, the challenges that we have converting Finale files to Sibelius and Dorico. With all of that being said, let's go into Finale. Let's look into the file menu. Let's look into the export submenu here and start talking about these MusicXML options. There's 4 options here. So the first option, linked parts to MusicXML. I'm not going to show you this. I'm going to tell you what this does. This will literally export all of the linked parts in the Finale file into individual MusicXML files that only contain a single part. So in this particular file, I'm going to end up with 12 different files, right? That is not necessarily the most useful thing. I'm going to tell you up front. You're going to end up with a lot of files that way, and I just don't see the value of actually doing it like that. MusicXML export is going to export the entire file, and that does include the linked parts, and I'll talk about that in a second when I look at the preferences. It does include the linked parts. It certainly includes all of the data in the score, so effectively you're including the linked parts anyway. And then you have this option to translate folder to MusicXML. This is really going to be your friend these days, because this option will literally do that. You select that and you choose the folder that you want to export, and whatever Finale files are in that folder will all get exported to MusicXML. So that option there, when we're talking about bulk exporting, this is really the way to go. It's the best way to do it. You don't need to do any scripting. This will basically do it for you. And then so let's look at the MusicXML preferences. So this is where a lot of interesting thing happens. Again, the whole right side of this window is related to importing MusicXML, and I am just going to ignore that for now. So let's talk about the left side. Let's talk about exporting MusicXML. So on the top section here, you can see that you have options for 4.0 all the way down to 1.0, right? These are all of the historical versions of MusicXML. I'm going to tell you right now that it doesn't matter if you choose 4.0 or 3.1 or 3.0. Just choose 4.0. I just told you a few minutes ago that Sibelius cannot deal with anything past 3.1. But here's the thing. It's not that Sibelius can't open a MusicXML 4.0 file. It's just that the extra information that exists in the 4.0 file will not get translated to Sibelius. So Sibelius will only look at the data that would be in the 3.1 file, right? So it's not like it's incompatible. It's just less complete. So you can, export a 4.0 MusicXML file and import that into Sibelius, and it will basically import all of the information that was common up through 3.1. There really is no reason whatsoever to ever export anything under 4.0. I'm not even sure why the options exist here. Now there's this option to include linked parts in compressed files. I'm going to tell you to just check that. It doesn't quite matter. Again, it's going to include the linked parts whether that option is checked or not, because it's including the data in all of the parts. And Sibelius and Dorico are going to generate their own linked parts, on their own. So having this option checked or not is not like you're not going to have linked parts. You are. It's just going to be, different. What this data does do is it provides some extra information for those linked parts, particularly with those things I was talking about in terms of formatting and in terms of positional data, right? In Finale, you can change the position of something differently in the linked part versus the score. Well, when you have this checked, all of that type of information also gets included in the MusicXML. Again, this is an area where it's a little bit wishy-washy as to whether Sibelius or Dorico can actually use that information in an intelligent way, but you might as well include it. So I'm just going to suggest that you keep that option checked. And then in the bottom left corner, this is all about the translate folder to MusicXML option that I showed you up in the file menu. There's a few options here. First of all, this silence error messages, you might as well turn this on. Again, if you're doing a whole bunch of batch exporting, first of all, it takes a a minute to do, not a minute, it takes like 10, 15, 20 seconds to export an XML file out of Finale, depending on the complexity of the file. So if you're exporting an entire folder of files, and there's 100 files in there, 200 files, that can actually take a while. So it's like the kind of thing you might want to just set it and walk away for a few minutes. If you do that and you walk away and there's an error, it's going to stop that process, and then you'd have to come back and like restart it and then walk away again. So by checking this option, you're telling Finale to not message you when there's an error. Instead, it will create a log file, whatever this is, and you'll be able to see the error messages later if there are any. So again, really no reason to not have this turned on when you're translating a folder to MusicXML. And then below that, you have two options here: export compressed data and export, or compressed XML, export uncompressed MusicXML. And you can see when I choose the uncompressed version, you can see that 1.0 and 1.1 become available in the top left corner. Compressed was only available starting in 2.0. So that's maybe one reason to export uncompressed, is that you could then export 1.0, which again, I don't know why you would do that. But the thing about compressed versus uncompressed MusicXML files, again, I did it here just so you can kind of see this, but check out the MXL file. That's this file here, and it doesn't matter if it's a plain text file or an XML file, the size is the same. This is 443 kilobytes for the compressed version. For the uncompressed version, it's 5.7 megabytes. That's a huge difference. The compressed versions are about 5% the file size as the uncompressed versions. And I'm telling you right now, there's literally zero difference between compressed and uncompressed MusicXML files. So I would highly suggest that you just leave it as the compressed version. Dorico and Sibelius read both compressed and uncompressed files. There's literally zero difference in information that's getting transferred between compressed and uncompressed. So you might as well save the hard drive space and just choose the compressed version. And then this option is really important, actually, the include subfolders. Without this checked, so here's a typical project folder that I would normally have for something. You know, it might look like this. I have separate folders for all of the Finale files, right? If I open this up, you'll see a Finale file here, but you'll also see I have an old versions folder here, and there are more Finale files, right? If I were to choose the export translate folder to MusicXML, and I were to choose this folder called typical project folder, it would only look in this folder, and it would only translate files that were directly in this folder. And right now there are no Finale files directly in this folder. If I were to choose the scene 1 folder within the typical project folder to convert, it would look inside that folder and only convert this particular Finale file, because that's the only file that's directly in that folder. When you choose the include subfolders, it will literally go down and look for every subfolder within that folder. So with this checked, I can choose this whole typical project folder, and it will literally find every single file in these folders and convert them to MusicXML. So if you're going to do this type of batch processing, and especially if you have this type of project architecture that I use, this is really important to have checked. So anyway, that's all of the XML preferences in Finale, and the way that you see it on my screen right now, this is the way that I would suggest that you go about converting all of your MusicXML. Now, again, you can convert files one at a time if you really want to, but that would require opening the file, going to File, Export, choosing MusicXML, then you get one file, then you open the next one, etc. Use this translate folder to MusicXML feature. It's going to be a lot faster if you're doing this in bulk, obviously. Theoretically, you could literally put all of your project folders like this into one folder on your computer, and tell Finale to convert that entire folder with that include subfolders folder option checked. That will literally go through and convert every single Finale file you have in one go. Again, that might be the type of thing where you probably have to leave your computer running overnight to do that, because it would take a long time. If you have 1,000 files, 10, 20, 30 seconds per file, it's obviously going to add up. So just be careful about that. And of course, if something bad happens and it stops the process, then it's hard to know where you are. So, maybe a better solution is to just do it like project by project, do the whole folder like this, and then find the next project, etc. All right, so that's exporting XML files out of Finale. Now I'm going to do something that I've never done on the Conquering Finale series. I'm going to open up Sibelius and Dorico. So let's go over to Sibelius. And normally when you open Sibelius, you get this quick start window. This is where we're going to be able to import an XML file. Now I've already created the XML file for this. You can see it over here in this folder. It's this one with a .mxl extension at the end here. This is what I'm going to be opening up in Sibelius. And in the quick start window, all you have to do is go to imports, and we have some options. You can import either a MIDI file or a MusicXML file. So let's just choose MusicXML. And it's going to ask you to obviously find that file. This is on my desktop in the Farewell Finale folder, and there is the XML file. And I'm going to go ahead and open that. And after a couple seconds, it's going to take a minute. And then we get some options. Now, normally these two options are checked. And these are the only options you have in Sibelius for MusicXML. And there's no other way to access these options. These only appear when you click that button to import an XML file. It starts importing it, and then it gives you these options. You can't set these globally, but when you come back to this window, they will be set the way you had previously set them. Now, there's not a lot of options here. There's a couple options for layout and formatting. Use page and staff size from MusicXML file. Use layout and formatting from MusicXML file. And then you can choose a house style if you don't use that. You can choose the page size if you don't use that. And then you can also have some options for instruments. You can let Sibelius choose the instruments and use the instrument names from MusicXML. You can check or uncheck both of those options. I have not honestly done a lot of MusicXML importing into Sibelius, but I've done some experimenting here, and I can tell you that the best thing you can do is sort of experiment with these options. I know that's sort of a lame answer here, but for this particular file, I found that it's best to let Sibelius choose the instruments and use the instrument names from the MusicXML file. But for whatever reason, it didn't work to let Sibelius use the page and staff size from the MusicXML. And also unchecking this seemed to produce better results for whatever reason. This could be completely different for different files. So, I'm unchecking these now because I know this is going to give me the best results. But sometimes in a different file, maybe checking this one or checking this one and not this one, etc. Some combination of these is going to give you a good result. My best advice is to, if it doesn't look good the first time, just start over and play with these settings here. So now that I've got this set the way that I've already experimented with and know this is the best way for this particular file, I click OK, and it'll take another few seconds to actually convert. And voila, I have my Finale file in Sibelius. Off the bat, you can already see some problems. There's no title. There's some other information in the top left, the top right that just doesn't exist in this file. Again, this is just a challenge with XML, particularly with these types of things, with titles, particularly in Sibelius, because titles are attached to the measure. They're not attached to the page, which is completely different in Finale. Like I said, there's just so many problems because there's no one-to-one relationship between certain items. So a lot of stuff just doesn't really work that well converting from one to the other. But as you can see, the core data is there. All of the notes are there. We can check this, but I'm confident that all of the notes are absolutely 100% correct. You're well on your way. Like, this would be way better than trying to actually re-enter all of this data. I mean, this is a huge file, 359 measures. You wouldn't want to start over from scratch entering those notes in, right? So this is obviously way better. Now, what I will tell you is that I've done a lot of importing of XML into Finale over the years, particularly coming from Sibelius to Finale. So what I'm doing now is sort of the opposite of that. And every single time that I've done that, I've imported the XML file first and then copy and pasted the data from the XML file into a specific template in Finale, right? When I'm going the other way from Sibelius to Finale. I think the same is true for both Sibelius and Dorico. So if this is what you're going to do, my suggestion is import the file like this, but don't use this file. Like, this is sort of an intermediate step, right? What I would suggest is you set up a brand new file with the instruments you need, with the titles the way that you want it, etc. It's a couple extra minutes to do that, but I think when you do that and then copy and paste the data over, you end up with better results quicker. So here's the file that I had done ahead of time. This is, it's using the same instrumentation, but now I have the data that I need. I have the titles. All of this stuff is correct. I know that the page size is correct. I know that the parts are set up the way that I want it. I don't have to worry about trying to readjust those things here and maybe missing something, right? I know this is set up the way that I want. And then all I have to do in Sibelius, you triple click the first measure and that selects that part for the whole piece. And then shift click down here. In Sibelius, what you don't want to do is you don't want to press select all, because this is a different type of selection. And it also selects a lot of the titles, which you don't want to transfer over here. So it's better to do it this way. Triple click. There we go. And then shift click so that we're selecting all of the measures without selecting all of that extra data. And then just copy and do the same thing in the template file. Triple click, shift click, and paste. And there you go. So now I have all of the data in this file, which I know is a lot cleaner as far as, formatting and titles are concerned. This obviously looks a lot better than without the titles and everything. So this is my suggestion. This is how I used to do it in Finale all the time when going from Sibelius to Finale, and I think it's still the best way going the other way from Finale to Sibelius. So yeah, open the XML file in Sibelius, but then just copy and paste it, and then when you're done, this other file, this intermediate step, just close it, and you don't need to save it, get rid of it. That's done, right? No, don't save. So there you go. So that's sort of the quick way to import into Sibelius. Now, I'm going to not save this. Let's quit Sibelius. Actually, no, let's just close this for now. Let's just do the same thing in Dorico. So I'm going to go down here and open Dorico, and you usually get the Steinberg hub. And what I'm going to do here is go to the bottom left and go to Open or Import File. You can also go up to the File menu in Dorico and choose Import and choose MusicXML. So that's also a way to do this, but we'll do it from the hub, Open or Import File. And again, it's going to ask you to find the file to open. So we'll find that same file again. It's the same MusicXML file that I just imported into Sibelius. Open, and again, it'll take a second. And there we go. So this is what that file looks like directly imported into Dorico. It's not too bad. Again, the titles are a little bit wonky. Like, it doesn't know what to do with this information. Finale handles text on the page, and this is actually a text attached to the measure. So that's why Dorico thinks this is here. It's just not, put it in the right place. It doesn't have the box around it. So yeah, not everything gets transferred correctly. There's also like two titles. You see the main title here and another title here. This has to do with Dorico's system of flows, and the default document is showing the flow title, etc. You will understand this a lot more once you start to understand how Dorico works. Other things, again, you'll see that the casting off, again, is completely different. You have three bars per measure, and then 4 bars, and then 4 bars, etc. Compared to Finale, which was, the way I had set it up here, is 5 bars and 5 bars. So again, it doesn't translate exactly perfect. What I will say is that Dorico does have a really long list of options for XML. So if you go into the preferences for Dorico, we go into the MusicXML import option, and you can scroll through these options. There are a lot of them. You can actually ask Dorico to import certain information or ignore certain information. And a lot of these things are unchecked by default. A lot of things are checked. There's advanced options for other things. So there's like categories, notes and chords. You have advanced options here. You have rests, and then you have other types of notations. And then there's even more options here. I'm not going to go through all of these right now because it would just take too long, and quite frankly, I don't 100% understand them myself yet. But suffice it to say, when you start to understand Dorico better, you will understand which options are handy to have checked. This note durations options, for example, right? If you read this, note durations will match those specified in the MusicXML file exactly, as if input using forced durations. And currently this is unchecked, so it's not doing this. But with this checked, it's going to import all of the notes exactly the same rhythm, but you're going to have forced durations applied to all of those rhythms. Now, if you're brand new to Dorico and you don't know what that means, this is what I mean by learning the program first. You have to understand what that means, what the implications of having all of the notes applied with forced duration means. You just, again, the more you understand it, the more these options make sense. the better results you're going to end up. There's a lot of things with stem direction, tie placement. I mean, you can read all of these options eventually, but the same thing with rest durations. This is very similar to the note durations. Slur directions, you can, if you uncheck slur directions, Dorico is going to recalculate all the slurs so that they would be default slurs per Dorico. But if you have this checked, it's going to try and match the slurs as they were in your file. Now, it can be advantageous to do one or the other depending on your goal. So if your goal is to re-engrave it in Dorico with Dorico's settings, with Dorico's spacing algorithms, etc., it might be advantageous to have less things checked. If your goal is to reproduce the finale file precisely as close as possible, then maybe checking more of these options is the goal. So you do have to think about this a little bit and think about what your goal is going from finale to Dorico with specific files, right? And again, as I mentioned, Daniel had talked about the fact that they're going to start expanding on this, and I presume what that means is they're going to start adding more options to this area of MusicXML import in the preferences. They're probably going to add other things that are available to import, so you'll get different options to check and uncheck. So again, in future versions of Dorico, this is actually going to become even more sophisticated. But again, just like in Sibelius, it's not a bad idea to do the same thing where you create a template file to copy and paste into, right? So I did the same thing here ahead of time. I created a template file. I've got the titles set up the way that I want it, the margins, the page size. Everything is set up a lot better than what ends up happening with the the default import of an XML file. And again, it's just you have to make sure you're in write mode. And in Dorico, you can actually just select all, copy, and then go to the new file, select all. Oops, you have to be in write mode. Select all and paste. And there you go. So, I might want to move this or, oh, right. Certain things are always going to be weird, so you might have to do some things here. I might actually want to get rid of that. Again, just knowing the program a little bit better will help make these things fall into place a lot better. Actually, I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that. There we go. Now we're talking. So again, in my opinion, it's just always better to create the template file to look the way that you want it, and then copy and paste the data from that XML imported file into the new file, and then just jettison that file. You don't need that anymore. And you're good to go. You can start engraving from here and doing whatever you need to do to the Dorico file from this point forward. All right, so hopefully that has helped. I think if there's a main takeaway here, the thing is, don't rush to import all your XML files to Sibelius or Dorico. As I mentioned, Sibelius will likely release an update to XML to 4.0 probably soon-ish, so there's no hurry. Just wait until that happens. Dorico has hinted that they will add some options in those preferences for other things in the XML format to be included on import. So, again, it's likely that the XML imports in both of these programs will be better later. You know what I mean? So there's no rush to import everything. Yes, export now. Export out of Finale now, because, export is not going to change in Finale. They're not going to change Finale at all. The export is what it is. So yeah, go ahead and do that now. Just leave the files in place. Whenever you need them, you can import them, whether that's a month or 2 months or 6 months or a year from now. Again, the XML import will be improved at that point, and you'll also know the programs a lot better, so importing the XML will be just a much smoother process, in my opinion, if you wait until later to do that. And interestingly, I've noticed sort of this beginnings of a cottage industry of sorts, of people sort of offering their services to convert Finale files to Sibelius or Dorico, and I think that's going to continue. There'll probably be some more of that. People are going to offer this as a service. So yeah, take advantage of that if you want to, if you need to, but again, I think conversion is going to be a little bit better later. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that specifically. It may be a service I offer at some point to help people convert from Finale to one of the other programs. We'll have to see. And interestingly, in the last couple of weeks, there's been sort of this flood of videos coming in on YouTube that are helping people migrate from Finale to one of the other programs. So if I find some of those that I like, again, I'll post the links on the website and on the description of this video. So that brings us to this. What's next? What's next for the website? What's next for Conquering Finale and myself and all that stuff? So let's start with the Conquering Finale website. The website will be active for at least a year. The crazy irony of this whole situation is that on August 26th, the day that Make Music decided they're not going to develop Finale anymore, that was also the day that Wix.com, where I host the website, charged my credit card for a 1-year renewal. So literally you have at least a year of the website. I'll have to see what things are like next August, whether or not I think it's worth keeping the website active for the cost, etc. So we'll see. Maybe I'll renew it 1 more year after that, but we'll see. The YouTube channel, where the videos are uploaded to, that will likely be here forever. It doesn't cost me anything to keep the YouTube channel, unless YouTube for whatever reason decides that that channel can't exist, which I don't know why they would do that. The videos will be there forever. You just have to find them on YouTube instead of directly on the website. I've been asked a lot in the last couple of weeks. A lot. I've been asked whether or not I will be creating a Conquering Dorico series, or a Conquering Sibelius series for that matter. I can answer that pretty definitively very quickly. No. You have to understand that it took me about 25 plus years to become the expert in Finale that I had become before I even started the Conquering Finale series. And then it took 5 years to build out the videos, the content and everything. And within those 5 years was the COVID-19 lockdown. So those 2 years where nothing was happening, I mean, I was doing a lot of the content for this project. So I can't count on another COVID lockdown, and I can't count on another 25 years of learning Dorico. I mean, granted, at this point, if I were to really concentrate my efforts, maybe I could get to that point in like 5 years, but that would be like, insane. And just to get comfortable enough to start doing that, and then another 5 years of building the content. I mean, that's a 10 plus year commitment to do something like this for Dorico or Sibelius. It's just not going to happen. It was a unique situation for Finale. There wasn't a lot of tutorial videos for Finale, so I felt like I was, filling a niche. There are a lot of tutorials for Dorico and Sibelius right now, so just the need isn't even there. So yeah, it's not going to happen. For now, I'm probably going to refocus my attention on my musical theater career. I'm a Broadway musician. Before I even started any of this Conquering Finale stuff, I was a Broadway musician. I've been doing a lot more orchestration work recently. I'm going to try and do a little bit more of that, so if you need an orchestrator, let me know. And aside from that, I have like the germs of small ideas of other possible content type of work that I might do in the future, just kind of banging around my brain right now. Nothing concrete whatsoever, so possibly in the future you might see me somewhere else on something similar, but likely not in Sibelius and Dorico. Of course, I will keep on as a copyist using Sibelius and Dorico. So for any of my clients that have been using me with Finale, I am going to be transitioning to both as well. So eventually we can keep working together for stuff like that. Now, as far as the future of music notation generally, yeah, I don't know. That's really hard to say. I mean, Finale was around for 36 years, which is a ridiculous amount of time for any piece of software. Let's just, say it for what it is. That's a ridiculous amount of time for a piece of software. So that's pretty incredible. And it went away. Sibelius is almost just as old. The Sibelius team seems to be very active right now, so I don't suspect that that's going to go away anytime soon. But who knows, 5-10 years from now, things change, so we don't know. Dorico, again, is 8 years old. I don't know how the program's doing financially. Maybe they're doing great, maybe they're not doing great, so who knows what the future of that is. And who knows, 5 years from now, there might be a completely brand new player in the space, so it's just hard to say. What I know right now is that for the near future, it's going to be Sibelius and Dorico. So now we come to the point where I'm out of things to say. So the last things I want to say are just thank yous. Thank you to all the people that subscribed to both the YouTube channel and the mailing list. I had about 3,800 YouTube subscribers, which is like way more than I ever thought I would be able to get. So that's incredible. All the fans, the people that have emailed me and messaged me, I mean, it's all been really amazing. And of course, all the people that have sent in donations, thank you, thank you, thank you. The donations have helped pay for the website. It's helped pay for a bunch of tools that I needed to keep the Conquering Finale series going. And it's, provided me a little bit of motivation to keep going with these videos. So that's really, really appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to the incredible Finale community. The Facebook pages have been incredible. I've met a lot of people, mostly virtually, through that, and the Finale community is incredible, and I'm really curious to see where they go. I'm sure some will go to Dorico, some will go to Sibelius. I'm sure I will see them all on both of those forums, so that'll be fun, especially in the near future. I think a huge round of applause has to go to both the plugin developers and the people that have been writing the RGP Lewis scripts recently. Particularly the RGP Lewis scripts have really been driving the innovation and efficiency gains in Finale for the last several years. So, I mean, first of all, Robert Patterson for bearing the torch that Jari Williamson started with JW Lua and changing that into RGP Lua so that can continue. I mean, that was just a huge deal. So Jari and Robert and Tobias Giesen, the TG Tools, Jan Eingermuller, Perfect Layout plugin developer. I mean, all these people put so much effort and time into those plugins. And the people that were writing these Lua scripts, the main ones, CJ Garcia, Carl Vine, Jacob Winkler, Nick Mazouk, who I think was also monitoring the Lua website and everything. I mean, just the incredible amount of scripts that they wrote, basically for nothing, just to make Finale better. It was just, I mean, you can't thank them enough. So for those people, thank you. And a very special, very, very, very special thanks to Michael McLennan, who is also one of those Lua script writers, but personally was one of the guys that I went to all the time. He helped me with some content with Conquering Finale. He monitored some of the classes that I did a few years ago, and literally, I mean, I would message him all hours of day and night about questions. I'd bounce off ideas off of him. So, thanks, Michael, for all of your help. Keyboard Maestro, I mean, he saved me so many headaches with Keyboard Maestro. So, yeah, I can't thank Michael McLennan enough specifically. So, thanks, Mike. And thank you to the viewers. I mean, the Conquering Finale channel ended up with over 250,000 lifetime views. That's incredible. I mean, I remember thinking I got to 100 views. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And then I got to 1,000 views. I was like, wow, I'd never expected this. 10,000, I was like, wow, this is really weird. But 250,000 views for the Conquering Finale series over just about 5 years. It'll be 5 years November 10th, by the way. That's incredible. I mean, thank you to all the viewers who have been watching these videos. It definitely made it sort of worthwhile for me to do them, knowing that a lot of people were watching them. So, thank you for that. So yeah, so that's it. This is the point of the video where I would normally tell you to subscribe, but yeah, I don't think there's any point. I think this is going to be the last video, so I don't see any point in subscribing, so you really don't have to do that. Just thank you. And I normally say I will see you in the next video, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So yeah, thank you. And I will see you soon somewhere else.